One institution after another in once Great Britain has been hollowed out, discredited, and roundly despised. The British court system is on trial this week in the Strand, in the High Court of Justice, where over 2 days an appeal hearing for the world's most prominent and important political prisoner has been unfolding. The judges have not yet opined, but if they opine the wrong way, then Julian Assange, the world's great publisher, journalist, truth-teller, will be on an aeroplane to the United States quicker than you can say Jack Robinson. And then you'll never see him again. You'll never hear from him again. He'll be placed before a hanging judge and jury in CIAville, otherwise known as the state of Virginia, and sent probably for the rest of his life to a supermax penitentiary, and his wife and children will kiss him no more, except very rarely through a glass screen darkly. The whole process has been a farce up to now. The question is, will the judges who presided over that farce now seek to rescue something from the ashes of Britain's reputation by finding in favour of Julian Assange, allowing him to appeal against the frankly ridiculous decision to send him to the United States on a one-sided extradition agreement by deliberately ignoring what the extradition treaty is supposed to be. I know something about this. When it was before the House of Commons, under then Home Secretary David Blunkett, a blind man, he said that on the face of the bill, it was patent that no political prisoner, no prisoner wanted for political offences, could be extradited under this new extradition treaty. He said it to me, face to face, man to man, because I had raised concerns about it, as had some others. He told us it could not happen, but now it is happening. Or at least unless the judges in the Strand this week decide to call a halt to a damaging farce which has cost the taxpayer hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to keep incarcerated a gentle journalist whose work was published by all the great newspapers of the world, many of whom then turned their back for many years on Julian, but have at least now all rallied to the call to halt the extradition. If Julian Assange is guilty of any crime, then every one of those newspapers who published his work are equally guilty of that offence. But offence there is none. Julian is being extradited on charges of espionage, but he was never in the United States. He's not a citizen of the United States. He owes no duty of any kind to the United States. He has no loyalty of any kind. Neither can he be expected to have any loyalty of any kind to the United States of America, whose war crimes he exposed to the world. And as I said on Sunday, if the criminals can make it a crime for a journalist to report on the actions of the criminals, then you are living in a criminal's state. And that maybe is where we are. The House of Commons is not what it was when I spent the best part of 30 years there. I'm hoping to go back there just over a week from now, and heaven knows they need me. They need some strong hand on the tiller, because anyone watching live on television right now at the farce, the chaos in the British Parliament knows that it has badly lost its way. I'm not going to bore you with the arcana of parliamentary procedure, but let me try to shorthand it. I never, in all of my time in Parliament, over the 1980s, 90s, noughties, and into the teens, I have never, ever seen the Speaker of the House of Commons choose 2 amendments on an opposition day when the opposition day belonged to the Scottish National Party. The precedent of the House of Commons and the whole thing is governed on precedent, on Erskine May and the precedent of centuries. The opposition party, whose opposition day it is, gets to put a motion and the government gets to put an amendment to it. In this case, the former Labour MP, Lindsay Hoyle, now the Speaker of the House of Commons and nominally independent, was nobbled. In fact, his knees were kneecapped, his ankles were shot through, his arms were tied behind his back to allow not one but two amendments to the SNP motion. Something absolutely without precedent. As the chairwoman of the Procedure Committee just told the House of Commons moments ago, there is no precedent in the entire history of the British Parliament for what the Speaker has just allowed. And he did it on the strength of the blackmail of the Labour opposition. So we've got a Speaker of the House of Commons who could be blackmailed by the opposition. What will happen, God forbid, should they ever be in government? And he's now retreated, he's run away, he's hiding in the building. Hundreds of members of Parliament are walking out noisily. The whole thing has collapsed when millions of people in the country were waiting to see who was for a ceasefire in the slaughter in Gaza and who was not. Why did he do it? Because of the pressure I and people like me up and down the country, the great demonstrations, the great protests, the independent candidates in by-elections like me, the pressure we've been putting on the leader of the Labour Party has become simply unbearable to him. He, if this manoeuvre, sordid manoeuvre, had not been executed this evening, would have been facing a rebellion of scores, maybe well over 100 of his own members of Parliament, who simply cannot return to their constituents without having voted for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Many of them are feeling the pressure. Many of them have small majorities that they're very certain they're going to lose their seats at the next general election. Others are afraid to face the public at all. They run away, like the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, now renamed Angela Runner. When she sees any of her constituents, she literally breaks into a run for the nearest car so that she can get out of town, because so many thousands of her constituents are disgusted by the Labour Party's support for Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza. So these Labour MPs wanted a third way, Tony Blair might call it, a third way that allowed them to pretend that they supported a ceasefire, but with a form of words which guaranteed no ceasefire at all. The form of words that they preferred made no mention of the collective punishment of the Palestinian people in Gaza, even though the International Court of Justice has already decreed that there is collective punishment bordering, if not over the border, in genocide in its hearing in The Hague just a few weeks ago. The SNP motion demanded an immediate ceasefire. The Labour amendment, which should never even be on the table, called for a humanitarian ceasefire, but only one agreed by Israel, not imposed by outside organizations, courts, UN, anything like that. No, one which Netanyahu could underwrite. And if you look, I could shorthand it even more. If you want to know the quality of the Labour amendment that should never have been, just look at who is proposing it. Not just Keir Starmer, not just Angela Rayner, but the Labour fiends of Israel. Not friends, the Labour fiends of Israel are all there in their glory, their names written on the order paper, dripping in blood. If they can support the motion, you can be sure that it has been agreed between the labour fiends of Israel and the Israeli embassy in London that funds them. If that's not true, they can publish who funds them. The fact that they will not publish who funds them makes it clear that it is a front for the state of Israel under Benjamin Netanyahu. Imagine Labour members of parliament funded by the embassy of Benjamin Netanyahu. If it was for a ceasefire, they would not be signing it. It's a wording that has been agreed with the worst scoundrels and criminals in the international community at this time. Any motion acceptable to Benjamin Netanyahu sure ain't acceptable to me, and I suspect many millions of others in this country and many millions of others overseas. Far from the chaos in the House of Commons, of course, a much greater chaos, a bloody chaos, exists in Gaza. You can see from these pictures the sea of starving, sick, and increasingly wounded and maimed humanity that is the Gaza Strip. The imminent invasion of Rafah, a tent city of 1.9 million people, by a Western armed force, a superpower, a military superpower, a nuclear armed superpower, are about to invade a tent city of 1.9 million people. It's normally 125,000. It's now 1.9 because the Palestinians have been cascaded from one end of the Gaza Strip to the other, told, go there, go there, go there. No move from there that we just sent you. You'll be safe if you go there. Oh no, we're about to bomb you there. And finally, almost 2 million of them have appeared in the very farthest corner of the Gaza Strip. Just a thin razor wire separating them from the Sinai Desert. A Sinai Desert which belongs to Egypt, which has declared that any attempt to transfer the Palestinian problem from Palestine into Egypt will not be accepted by them. And a state of war will exist between Egypt and Israel if this attempt is made. The bombing continues day and night. 70% of the people who are cut down by that bombing are women and children. These are not my figures. These are the figures of the United Nations. Now some 112,000 people are either dead, wounded, with no possibility of hospital treatment, or missing under the rubble, and of course, therefore, dead. 112,000 people out of a population of 2.3 million. Well over 5% of the Palestinians in Gaza are dead, wounded, mutilated, or missing under the rubble. Just for an exercise, do 5% of your own country's population, and then you'll see the scale this devastation represents. 10% of the population of Britain is more than 3 million dead, wounded, or missing under the rubble. Do the maths for your own country. This is a very considerable injury, an unprecedented injury, one that has really never been seen before in modern times. The operative word being seen. There have been other massacres, there have been other genocides, but we weren't able to watch them happening as they're happening on our personal telephones. Our children were not able to see them actually happening. So these are unprecedented numbers. This is an unprecedented crime. It represents an unprecedented injury. But the insult that is added to this injury is that throughout the Western world, the establishment political parties and the establishment mass media have covered for this crime, have justified this crime, have censored the pictures of this crime, have throttled the voices standing out against this crime, have criminalized, marginalized almost literally vaporized any opposition in Western countries. There are countries like Germany where it is now illegal, a criminal offense, to speak as I am doing to you right now. The door could get kicked in. The police could take me away in handcuffs for committing a crime, for telling the truth, just like has happened to poor Julian Assange in Belmarsh. That's the insult that's been added to injury. Truth has been stood on its head. The victims have been painted as the aggressors. The aggressors have been painted as the victims. The Palestinians are called terrorists, while those inflicting terrorism upon them in real time on your telephone are called the victims of terrorism. This insult, this injury will never be forgotten. The bodies and the blood of the dead and wounded in Gaza will stain the clothes, the hands, and hang around the necks like a giant albatross of all the political parties in the Western world who have made all of this possible, who send the guns, who send the money, who send the diplomatic cover at the United Nations, who extend the unlimited recognition to the criminal state of Israel, who welcome it with a red carpet, who send their delegations endlessly there to serve the purposes of Israeli propaganda. These parties will never be forgiven. Which brings me back to what's happening in the British Parliament right now. They know it. They know that we know it. And they know that we're going to act upon it. They know that I stand on the brink of an historic by-election victory which will shake the walls of Westminster. A victory which will change history, not just because of its importance in itself, a referendum on Gaza, which will have a resounding result, but because it will act with the power of example to encourage people like me to stand up against the so-called mainstream political parties who are now roundly hated by millions, maybe tens of millions of people in this country. And everything that I have said about British politics applies, because everything's bigger in America, applies in the United States equally. We have there too a situation where Zion Don and Genocide Joe are vying with each other as to who can be meaner to the Palestinians, who will kill more of them, who will facilitate the killing of more of them. The fact that one is berserk and the other is suffering from acute dementia is a very real problem when you're claiming to be the leader of the world. And if I have contempt for the American political class, imagine what I feel for the European political class that have decided to go over the cliff with Genocide Joe Biden. Just think about that. It's going to be the mother of all talk shows, with great guests, great calls, a great poll, and we want to hear from you. Fasten your seatbelts. It's live from Rochdale. Get used to it.